All right, it's a beautiful morning here, nice and cool. We have had an uncharacteristically cool spring so far. Out here, I'm gonna do a quick mid-June garden walkthrough just to kind of show how everything is progressing. So I'm going to start here with just these two potted up butterbush squash, bush variety squash. They're coming along, no flowers yet, but it's a Machada variety of squash. And my experience has been that machadas just kind of take a while to flower and fruit, unlike maximas and pepos, which go pretty quick. Next up, a bed of primarily serrano and cayenne pepper. And these are doing really well. All of them starting to form fruits here. As you can see, cayennes in the back are still a little bit smaller, but they're coming along nicely. And again, here we have two Thai chilies and a ghost pepper in the back. See how the ghost pepper goes. I don't think I'll really be eating it. It's a little too hot for me. Sunflowers, just for decorative purpose. This one's kind of nice opening up here. And we have two beds that are nicely starting to overgrow with one butterbush squash plant, which may be completely overrun by the sweet potato here. I've recently backed off on, well, actually, I never gave the sweet potato any nitrogen because it's not exactly what you want if you want good sweet potato tubers. Um, I have switched for the sweet potatoes to a potassium only fertilizer. It's just soluble potash to give a nice big boost of potassium, which, in addition to giving fruiting plants nice, good fruits, potassium is what's responsible for good, healthy tubers in things like potatoes and sweet potato. Pretty psyched about this. These are two of our Cherokee Purple tomato plants. They're really pretty heavily laden with fruit at this point. I've been going along, or they're an indeterminate variety. So this year I kind of picked two stems, and I've just been trimming the leaves and trimming off all the suckers as we go. And it looks like that's paying off because these tomatoes are starting to get really big. So I'm pretty psyched about that. This is my favorite slicing tomato variety here. They do they tend to kind of they're a little prone to cracking on the bottom, but I don't care. I'm not trying to sell them. And you just kind of, like this one here, you can see there's already some cracking forming around the stem. It just kind of happens as they get big fast. It's not a big deal. I just kind of trim off the crusty brown parts and eat around it, and it's still just as delicious. More tomatoes here. San Marzanos, our sauce tomatoes, are also really coming along nicely. There's even one here starting to ripen up. This squash plant here is a volunteer. It kind of sprouted out from underneath one of these planter barrels, and it was looking really healthy and forming healthy looking fruits. So I kind of rolled with it, and I rigged up a makeshift trellis out of some materials I had left over from the big project this spring. I couldn't see it in me just to pull it because, again, it's producing nicely here. Looks like it's going to be some kind of Hubbard squash, probably a hybrid. We planted a lot of Hubbard style squash last summer, and when you have different cultivars of the same variety, a bunch of different kinds of, say, Maxima squashes, they cross pollinate. So what I could get could be something that I've never really seen before, some kind of weird Franken squash. All right, and here we have the two blue beds here, full largely of determinate tomatoes. We have a couple of aroma plants mixed in. And these aroma tomatoes, it's spelled Oroma, really surprised me because they were just kind of unhealthy looking plants. And they are packed with tomatoes. The whole time that I've had these, the leaves have been kind of wilty. They've just kind of been sad, weepy looking plants. And so I'm just really surprised that not only did they produce any fruit, but they're pulling the plant down with it. So I'm really excited about these. These should probably will be finishing up within the next month, maybe month and a half. They've reached their maximum height as determinates do, and once all the flowers turn into fruit, what is going to turn into fruit of the flowers, probably by mid-July, everything will have been ripened up. And I'm actually going to try a second crop of these since they went pretty quick. So I'm going to rotate these out, refertilize the bed, and I have new tomato starts going under the grow lights inside. And the second bed here of determinate tomatoes, we have the Rio Grande tomatoes, another plum slash sauce slash paste variety. And we've got one that's, or two, I don't know if I can get the camera in here to show, but they're ripening. The one on the right's probably we're going to pull it and just uh, cut it up for a salad to see how it tastes. I've heard that these are actually pretty good for just eating as well as for making sauces and salsas and stuff. So we'll see how it goes. Probably overpack these a little bit. It is a little, they're a little too close together, a little hard to get into and see everything, but uh, sometimes it's how you get a big yield out of a small garden, is sacrificing space, sacrificing the convenience of being able to see and access everything quickly. But because these are a determinate, I can, when the plants are on their last legs, I can just cut the plants, take any partially ripened fruit, and let them ripen up inside. Boston pickling cucumbers here started to take off. They're climbing the trellis nicely. And even these are also finally starting to form cucumbers. So again, it won't be too long before we're starting to make our first few jars of pickles. This bed of cucumbers, however, of another row of Boston pickling, aren't doing as well. I miscalculated how much light this bed gets in the summer, and it gets some direct sunlight, but not really enough for sun-loving squash and cucumber plants. It looks like they're growing slowly. I'm sure I'll get something out of it, but I don't think that these are going to yield a ton, like some of the other stuff in the garden here. It's a similar story with our yard-long beans, which are a hot weather, sun-loving plant, and I just don't think for the most part that these are going to get enough light to really flourish. Again, we'll get something out of these, but it could be better if it was in a different spot. These are just kind of the mistakes that you make going along. Like I think that these um, barrels here along the back end of the north side of our yard, which just don't get all that much direct sunlight, would be great for more shade loving stuff during the summer. Like I started here a barrel half and half of basil and parsley. And while basil isn't really known for being a shade loving crop, in Sacramento it's a shade loving crop. Direct hot sun for 12 to 15 hours a day will burn out basil. And of course, the hardware cloth over the top is to keep out the squirrels and cats, so the plants have a chance to actually grow before they're torn up. We have another really nice clutch here forming of San Marzano tomatoes. We're going to get a lot out of this plant alone, I think. The double stem method is working out really well for our sauce tomatoes, our San Marzanos, and our slicing tomatoes, our Cherokee purples, but it doesn't. The cherry tomato indeterminate varieties are a different story. We'll get to it in a moment, but having some problems with those. All right, here we have one of our two black cherry indeterminate tomato plants. Um, and while has formed some really nice fruit clusters here, it's also being afflicted by something that I haven't quite identified yet. What this disease, ailment, whatever is doing, it's causing leaves to wilt and die. It's not really affecting the stems, the flowers, or the fruit. These fruit look great. But what was happening is, and you can see where I pruned off like all of the branches, is starting with the lower branches, the leaves would wilt and die. They would develop almost kind of like a purple-ish looking dead spot or dead pattern that followed the veins of the leaf, and then a day or two later it would be dead. Not sure what it was. It doesn't match any of the pictures of the early or late blight or any of the other fungal diseases I found. No real pest activity on these. I did hit it with a copper antifungal spray and then just trimmed off all of the branches right up to the top, except, leaving just a tuft that I'm hoping will regrow to get a few more fruit out of the plant. Also, whatever it was started affecting its neighboring plant here too, so I took the same approach. Again, we're going to get some good fruit out of these two, but I think that for uh, indeterminate cherry varieties, we've got a squirrel fight up in the trees there. The double stem or single stem method is severely cutting down on how many cherry tomatoes you're going to get out of a single plant. Last year, we let our cherry tomatoes and all of our indeterminate tomatoes just kind of go, and they turned into these huge bushes. And honestly, one cherry tomato would have given us more tomatoes than we could handle for the entire summer. But I think we're just going to get a pound or two out of each of these, and that's going to be it. Uh, it's all a learning experience. Every year, I try something new. Sometimes it really works out. Sometimes it doesn't. But I have, as with the sauce tomatoes, I have some backup bush variety cherry tomatoes to sub out when these give up or when I have some extra space available as I harvest things. Also wanted to point out that our eggplants are actually doing well so far this year. Time will tell, of course, but in the past we've struggled with eggplant. We get really nice plants and they flower and they start to produce fruit, but all of the fruit is tiny. It's like fist sized on eggplant varieties that should be producing these club sized fruits. So this year we didn't devote too much garden space to eggplant. Not wanting to devote a bunch of space to stuff that was going to fail. So while we kind of figure out our eggplant game, we went down to 3 plants, and so far they're actually all doing pretty well. So fingers crossed on those. Armenian cucumbers, my favorite cucumber variety every summer. These really took off since the last garden walkthrough video. They're already up past the top of the trellis, and they're well into forming fruits. This one will probably be ready sometime next week. These get huge. They can get to be baseball bat size, but the sweet spot, for before they're seedy, before they get too bitter, and when you harvest these in like the 12 to maybe 16-inch range, that's ideal. They're excellent. No peeling is required, so unlike a lot of cucumber varieties, you don't have to peel them before eating, and they just have a really nice flavor to them. When you harvest them in their ideal window, there's no bitterness to them. To me, a lot of cucumbers they taste really bitter, but these never do. They make great dill pickles as well. They don't look like traditional dill pickles, but they taste exactly like them. All right, up next we have my Seminole pumpkin bed. This again is something that also really exploded and took off over the last month. Uh, as you can see, I have the vines. I'm trying to keep the vines too much from spilling over onto the ground, and limiting pathways and stuff. So as these grow, some of them will latch on as I need them to, uh, with these tendrils. But others, sometimes I give them a little helping hand, and I'll use a soft ligature to kind of just affix them to the ropes here that I have corralling everything off. The foliage is spectacular on these, but I've yet to see a flower. So my concern was there's a little too much nitrogen in the soil and not enough of the phosphorus and potassium. So I did back off on nitrogen fertilizers and upped phosphorus and potassium fertilizers. Still no flowers yet, though I am seeing some buds. Hopefully within the next week or two, I'll center that there. Hopefully the next week or two, these will actually start flowering, and then beyond that, fruits will form. Really hoping that this doesn't somehow turn into a really cool looking bed of greenery with not a fruit in sight. And my final winter squash variety that I have going at the moment, this is the golden nugget squash. And as you can see down there, they're already starting to form some really nice clusters of the little squashes that they um, produce. This is sold as a bush variety squash, but in truth, it's turning out to be kind of a semi-vining squash. Uh, there's sprouting from each base of these is a single thick vine that I actually had to rig up additional support to keep it out of the way. Try to see if I can move some leaves here and get a better look at it. These leaves are huge. So as you can see, following that green pole, that is the center vine that sprouted. And the cool part is that it's producing fruit all the way. I don't know how far this is going to go, but I'm not complaining anytime extra fruit is produced. Bell peppers are taking off. These are another surprise to me because they were looking terrible and sickly in their starter pots. Leaves were yellowing and falling off the stems, and I just kind of rolled with it anyway, which I guess it's a good lesson to kind of shoot from the hip sometimes, even if it looking like it's not going to work out. But as you can see, there's nice peppers starting to form. I like to let them get red. I prefer them sweeter as opposed to, the slightly more bitter green peppers. But there's plenty to do both, that's for sure. All right, and my potatoes, which are a huge surprise to me. I've never had potatoes stay alive this long into a Sacramento summer. These ones here in the grow bags were seeded in March. They were planted in about March. So I'm going to let them go. Hopefully, I'll be able to let them go just until they flower and the vines start dying on their own. This one planter of Yukon Gold potatoes here in this sort of wooden extension box that I built. I planted these in January, but they were slow to take off due to the chilly, wet winter. But these are actually starting to die back, and I think I'm going to be harvesting these ones in the next couple of days. So we will, kind of see what this tiny little, how much Yukon Gold potatoes come out of this little, whatever it is, 2x2 space. All right, so as always, since I have no idea how to end these garden walkthrough videos, here is just some footage of our chickens losing their mind and tearing my hand apart trying to get some dried bugs. Thanks for watching, everybody.